Ibispaint, my all-time favorite digital art app, period, of all time. There's no competitor at all. I've used this app for all my comics, I use it for a lot of my animations, and today I'm going to give you guys the full guide. Like, I'm going to tell you everything that this app can and cannot do, where and how to make it do those things, and by the end of this video, you will be an Ibispaint expert, I say. I think that most of us as artists know exactly what we want out of our programs. We just do not know the language in which to tell them to do those things. So I'm going to act as your translator and show you guys exactly what this app can do and let you decide what you want to do with it. So you're going to open the app and you're going to be met with the home screen. It's going to show you what version of Ibispaint you're in. I'm in 13.0.3. It gives you this little daily ranking thing, which is cool because Ibispaint has its own little social media community type thing. I don't really use that, but it's still a cool little feature. You can press this kind of arrow here and filter your little daily ranking thing if you want. That's a pretty cool little feature. Now this video is going to have chapters in it, and it'll allow you to jump around wherever you need. If you want to reference back to this video, or if you have a specific question or a tool you want some answers on, feel free to jump around. I'm going to do my best to go through this as quickly as possible, but I'll do my best to give you guys the best possible roadmap to Ibispaint. Starting with this home page, this button will open your gallery, which is where you're going to do most of your work in this app, and this button will open the little online Ibispaint website where you can access that community that I mentioned earlier. You can also download brushes from here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You're also going to have your settings window up here. Also, that little P means premium. Ibispaint does have a paid version, which is honestly super worth it. It's like $2.99 a month or something, or you could just pay for the year, which I do. It allows you access to so many more features, and if you use it pretty much every day like me, it's definitely worth the investment. Now, there's a lot of settings you can adjust. I'm going to go through the simple, quick ones first, then we'll get into the actual app itself and come back to the more detailed settings later. So upon opening the settings thing, you'll get a bunch of settings that you can adjust. I mean, obviously, it's the settings window. Most of them are pretty straightforward once you get a little bit more comfortable with the app. Like undo 2 fingers tap basically means that if I have this switched on, if I tap with 2 of my fingers, I can use the undo. So if I do a line, I can just undo it with tapping. I don't have to press the arrow buttons that they have. Same for the redo. The quick eyedropper means if I press and hold with my finger, I'll have access to an eyedropper tool, which an eyedropper tool basically allows you to pick a color from anywhere on the canvas and then use that color. So that's what the eyedropper tool is. And I always love using the quick eyedropper because you just press and hold and you get your color and you move on. You can even adjust how long it takes to activate that little touch and hold, like how long you have to hold it for. I've never messed with this. It's usually good how it is, but you can, which is really nice. You have your user interface section. First thing, I just want to let you guys know, you always want that reference window on. That reference window is going to be super key. You might not want it on because I don't know what type of artist you are, but I'm going to pretty much guarantee you that you're going to want it on. The window color, you can change it from black and white. If you keep your phone in dark mode, like I'm sure most of us do, you're going to want to switch it to black. For those of you with the light mode, first of all, how are your eyes? Are you guys okay? Secondly, you're going to want to switch that to black because black is the best way to go. We do not want it white. Now, most of these settings will make more sense after you get comfortable with the app, but we'll come back to a lot of them later. For now, that's the basics. A couple of settings you can adjust right away. You can scroll, there are more. There are some that are straightforward. This background color is really cool. It is a premium benefit, but basically I'll show you what that background color does later. I'm giving you guys a lot of stuff for later, but let's get into the now. Press this button here and it opens your gallery. Now for you, if this is your first time opening the app, it will be empty. I have a lot of Canvas is in here because I've been using this app for a while, but for you it will be empty. So this gallery, you can scroll through your canvases and, navigate from there. But right now we're going to add a canvas by pressing this plus button. You'll immediately get a bunch of settings. So you have import picture, which basically will allow you to use a picture as the base for your canvas. I don't think I've ever really used this. It does have a purpose, like I've used it occasionally, but most times if you're going to create an illustration from start to finish, you don't need that. You can set your own aspect ratio for your canvas here. You can adjust the width and the height with these sliders. You can use this plus and minus sign to adjust it, and you can just straight up type values in if you have a specific size that you need. They also have some quickly preset options for you, which are great. This little arrow here next to some of the options is for adjusting the size and the resolution of said option. So if I press this one, 1280 by 720, that's like the basic YouTube, iPad, computer screen size that fits most of those things, but you can size it up or down. If I want to go 2K resolution, I go 1920 by 1080, and so on and so forth. I keep it at 3K because I like my resolution perfect. But that's just depends on how powerful your device is. If you keep scrolling, you have some other options here, like the manga manuscript, which even though I make manga, I've never used. I can't tell you much about some of these, except like they're pretty straightforward. You have the A4 size. DPI is basically your resolution. You usually want 300 at least, because that allows you to have a pretty quality image. Higher is better, but again, puts more pressure on your device, so keep that in mind. If you keep scrolling down, you'll see the animation, because you can animate on Ibispaint. You can just press one of those and create an animation canvas. Today's video isn't about animation. We'll get into that in a separate video, but you have that as well. That new brush pattern feature they just added, so I'm not too familiar with it yet, but for now, we're just going to create a canvas. I'm going to make it, let's see here, 19 by 1080. And here you go. You have your workspace here. You're immediately greeted with it. This thing up here is the reference window I told you about. You can use your fingers to pinch, zoom, and twist your canvas around. But first thing we want to do is lower the color of this canvas, because white is pretty aggressive. If you press here, you can use this background thing, press the white, and you can just lower that. That was jumping a little bit ahead of this tutorial, but I just wanted to give you guys the option to lower that color, because if you look at your screen a lot, you don't just want to have that bright white on you. Now, I'm going to delete this reference window real quick. I'm just going to give you guys the rundown of the basic Ibispaint experience. This is every feature, every tool that's presented to you. We're just going to go down the line in order of importance. So the first tool that they'll have selected for you right off the bat is the brush tool. I can use my finger, or I recommend getting a stylus like this. I'll put it on the screen. They're pretty inexpensive, and it'll allow you to draw on your device screen more like you're drawing on paper. It's not digital, so you don't have to connect it with Bluetooth or anything like an Apple Pencil or something. Only downside is you can wear them out after a little while, but they're cheap, you can replace them, and it's my preferred method of drawing. So using something like that, you can just draw with the brush tool, super simple. You have this control down here, which allows you to adjust the size of your brush. So if I drag it over here, you can see this pencil tool that I have is bigger, or I could bring it back down and it will be smaller again. You can adjust those with these arrows or with the slider. And now in the newest Ibispaint, you can press the number here and type in your desired number just like that. Now over here is the opacity, which basically means how light or see-through something is. So right now it's at 100. So as you can see, if I zoom in, that pencil is dark. Also, a little note, you're probably not using a pencil right now because I have a pencil set up. You're probably gonna get this smooth brush, the basic one. I'll show you later how to get to this pencil brush and how to navigate the brushes. But for now, for opacity, if I lower it, you'll see that the pencil comes out lighter and it's a little bit more opaque, you know, a little bit more see-through. You can adjust that depending on what you're doing. Now, I have this canvas clogged up with stuff now, so I want to get rid of it. I press the eraser tool. That's the second tool we're going to talk about. Same principles as the pencil tool, except it erases. You can size it up like this and erase. You can lower the opacity of the eraser tool and it will erase less aggressively, which is cool sometimes. And that's really going to be how you get rid of anything that you don't want. There are other ways to get rid of stuff too, but the eraser is the most common. Now what I just did is I pressed this button here, this tool switching button. Basically what that allows you to do is quickly switch from your pencil to your eraser with one button. Those are your two most used tools, most likely. In Ibispaint, you might not need to erase if you're like me, an artistic genius, but you're gonna need both of those. I'm just kidding. So your pencil and your eraser tool, most basic tools, and the ones you're gonna be using the most. Now, down here, I'm gonna go away from this toolbar for a second. You have your undo redo button right here. You have this arrow button, which will just kind of get rid of all these toolbars, make your space a little bit more simple. Press it again, bring it back. You have this button right here is your color button. So you press that, it brings up this color wheel. You can select your hue, your saturation here. You can pick your color. You can use these little sliders. You have these little numbers, which you can add in a color code if you have one. Let's say you do graphic design. You have a specific color code. You can press those numbers and enter it in. I've never done that, but you could do that. You have these sliders. You can pretty much just adjust your color however you want. Now let's say you make a color that you like and you want to keep it for later. You have your color palette here. You press and hold the color, drag it in there, and bam, now you have that as a referenceable color. If you don't want it anymore, press and hold it and you can delete it like that. Down here also is just your most recent colors. So whatever color I most recently used will appear there, which is pretty cool. Let's say you just want to quickly go back to something you were using earlier. You could just use that window right there. And that's the color window. Then you have over here your brush window. You press on that, it's gonna pull up a whole bunch of stuff. Let's take you through it right here. If you're opening it for the first time, you'll most likely be in the basic side, which is basically all the default brushes that come with Ibispaint. And if you scroll down, you will see the pencil tools. The one I was using at the beginning of this video is the coarse pencil. You can tap on that if you want. Now you'll see these little plus signs next to the brushes. By pressing on that, it will add them to the custom side of your brushes, and you'll have a little list of brushes that you like and use frequently. Now, this stuff on this side is basically how you adjust that brush. You can adjust the thickness of the start, of the end. To be honest with you, I don't mess with my brushes like that too much. I'm a simple guy in that respect. I like it how it comes. You don't really need to adjust it, but you can. There's a lot of metrics to adjust these brushes. The thing I'll do the most is set the size that I like, because I like to switch through different sizes. It reminds me of when I was a traditional artist and I had my different size pens. So I'll create the same brush in different sizes, and then I'll just name it. If you go over here to the settings part, you can just rename your brush, and I just keep it like that. And I pretty much just take the default brushes and adjust their sizes, rename them, and those are the brushes that I use, and I like it that way. This is my main inking brush, the soft Japanese dip pen. I just have a lot of different sizes of that. So that's the brush window. Also, right here you have online. You press that, it will take you online, where you can then download brushes. As I mentioned earlier, you can search for the brushes, enter keywords, and these little barcode things, you just press them, and then you can download the brush, which I've used it before. It's pretty cool. And then also, you have this little search bar. If you have a specific brush name and you can't find it, you can just type it in, and it will come up, and you can search for your desired brush by name, which is a really cool feature to have. Sometimes you can lose track of the brushes in how many they have, or you might want a specific type of brush, like you just want something with an ink kind of look or a watercolor kind of look. You could type that in, and you can kind of find something suitable. Now that's the entire bottom row of tools, except I know you're looking at these two on the right, and I know I've said this a lot, but we will come back to that. Okay, so here we're going back to the left side, to the toolbar over here. I'm going to show you from top to bottom now that I've gone through the most commonly used tools. You have the transform tool, which basically means I have this circle right here. By pressing the transform tool, it allows me to transform whatever is on the screen and in the current layer that I'm on. So I can move it around, I can adjust the size right here when I'm in this translate scale option. You can even use these sliders here to get a more to the T and to the number translation or movement of the object if you know exactly where on the canvas you want it. But usually just eyeballing it and moving it to where you want it is best. But in this same transform tool, you have perspective form, which when you use that, allows you to adjust the perspective of your object, which is really, really cool. I use this all the time. I can make this circle look like an oval if I want to, just by stretching it out. I can make it look like a ground plane by flattening it out like so, and it really just gives you a lot of options. I use this perspective form a lot. Again, you have sliders and different things right here, but I don't really use that. If you look at the bottom, you'll see current layer and canvas. So that basically means that I can let this tool affect only the layer that I'm on, or the entire canvas, which basically means everything on every frame that is currently visible. So you might want that sometimes. And then finally you have mesh form, which I use the least. It's similar to the perspective form, but it allows you to manipulate these points right here, which will then manipulate your image according to those said points. So I'll look at it like this. I can move the circle like this and adjust these points. Also, you can adjust how many points you have, which will allow you to adjust the shape even more. It's a cool feature. Like, I use it. Sometimes it's really necessary if you want to adjust your object. Like, I'm making this circle look kind of like a heart. Not the best for making something like this. Better to just draw it that way to begin with. But trust me, there is a use case for it, and it's good to know about it. Now, to apply the changes you made, you would press the check mark, but I pressed the X since I didn't want to apply them. Also, if you're in the translate scale mode, and let's say you move it around, make it bigger, and then you press perspective form to adjust the perspective as well, you're going to lose what you did in the translate scale mode. And same thing for switching between any of these modes. If you want to adjust it in both or all three of the modes, do the translate first, press the check mark to accept it, then you come back and do whatever you want in the other mode, and so on and so forth. Now, next tool is the magic wand tool, which is basically like a selection tool. So if I press it, you'll see these dotted lines appear, which basically mean that it's selected everything inside of this circle. So it's basically like a bucket tool that can select. I can press outside of the circle and it'll select that too, or I could press the circle itself and it will now select the circle. Selection basically means that you'll only affect what you've selected. So I'll demonstrate here. With the circle selected, I'll grab a different color so you can clearly see what's happening. When I have the circle selected, the dotted lines allow you to see that it is, yes, selected. When I draw with this red color, I'm drawing outside of the circle, right? But when I take my pen off the surface, you'll see that it disappears and it's only applied the change inside the selected area. This is really cool. Let's undo all that. Let's say that I want to draw something in this circle only. I can use the magic wand to select it, and then I can draw and do whatever I want to do and keep it in this circle. This is great for if you're doing some shading, or if you have a specific boundary that you don't want to go outside of, you can quickly select that. Now, to get rid of the selection, you press this button right here, that square with the slash through it, that will get rid of the selection. Or you can press this button, this little black and white button, which will invert your selection, which basically means it'll do the opposite. So if I have the inside of the circle selected, when I press invert, it'll select everything outside of the circle. So now I can't draw in the circle, but I can draw outside of the circle. So that invert selection really comes in handy as well. I don't know why I made the circle look like this, but that's what it looks like. Also, you have gap recognition. You could turn that on. Let's say if you had some gaps in your lines, it would be able to discern that and select even through that. You have these different modes here. Subtract mode. So let's say I want to unselect this stuff. With subtract mode on, you tap, and instead of selecting, it will unselect everything within the boundaries of the line. So now I can only draw right here because that's the only thing selected. That's really cool. Sometimes you might want that. And then also you have set. Now I don't really know what set does. I think it selects everything in a certain group. So like all the lines in this area. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really use it, but it's there. Another option that is there. You also have more settings you can adjust, like what boundary the selection tool respects, how strong it is, how far it expands, different things like that. You can set it from canvas to current layer to specific layer, which basically means canvas means it'll select everything that's on the canvas and visible, or it will be underneath the boundaries of everything that's visible. And then current layer means it will only select things on the current layer. Specific layer, you can select a specific layer to select from, and so forth. You can also reset the tool settings too if you mess some of them up. Just reset it to default also. Now, I'm going to show you another way to get rid of a selection without using this button here. Let's say you get rid of the selection and you don't feel like going back into the magic wand tool. You press up here, this dotted square button, and you'll see that remove selection area. You can press that and it just goes away for you. Also, you have more tools up here in this little area. You can invert the selected area from there, which we touched on earlier. You can clear the layer, which is cool. You can clear everything that's been selected, or if you have nothing selected, like we remove the selection, you can clear everything in the layer. You can select opacity, which basically means anything that exists, for lack of a better frame of words, basically anything that is opaque enough to be on your canvas, it will select that. So every line, every color, everything like that, it means it will select everything that does exist. See, it leaves a little bit of a gap there because it did not pick up on those little outside lines. So it's only selecting opacity. You also have expand contracted area. So let's say I press select opacity, and I press expand contract area. I'll expand it by 2. So now it has selected everything, it's not leaving those little lines. And basically, expanding your contracted area will let's put it back, it'll go outside of the lines a little bit. So let's say I expand it by nothing, I expand it by a little bit. You can see it just expands that selection area, and the blue represents your selection area. So close that out. Also up here, while we're up here, you have the copy tool. Press that, you can copy whatever is selected. If you don't have anything selected, it will copy everything in the current layer on the canvas. And then you have paste, so if you have something copied, you can paste it. Now I have two of these little demon things. Let's undo that. And then also you have the cut, so you can just get rid of everything that's been selected, but it leaves your selection there, which is pretty cool. And then I'm gonna get rid of that selection again. There's also color range, which is another thing I don't really use, so I don't really know what to tell you guys about that. It's not a necessary feature for me, I'll just say that. Now moving on from the magic wand, you have the Lasso Tool, which works very similarly to the magic wand, except you can draw your selection and it will select what you have drawn, like that, which is really cool. If I have certain things that, let's say I'm drawing these two characters here very quickly. He has a weird stance to him and some long arms. And then let's say I'm drawing this character here. He's kind of on the shorter side. And they both stand weird and have long arms, okay? So let's say I want to select just this guy on the right. I can use my lasso tool, draw around him, and now he's selected. And I can move him around by pressing this transform tool. You'll remember that from earlier. I can invert the selection, so now everything except that guy is selected. I can delete the selection, or let's say I selected too much. Let's say I selected a little bit of that guy. You can go here to subtract, which the magic wand tool also had that subtract. And now everything I select is removed from my selection, which is cool. And then let's say I remove too much, he's not selected enough now. You can go to add, and now everything you select will be additive. And then you have set, which is just, it'll only select one time. So once I set it to set, it'll only select in that section, and then I have to do it again. It'll delete what I previously selected. Most times I keep it in additive. That's the best way to do it. And then you just select what you want, move it right here, and now they're separated. They didn't want to be next to each other anymore. And delete that selection again. And that is the lasso tool. Now you have this FX filter tool. These are a bunch of settings. I'm not going to go through every single one, but I'll give you an idea. You have these different windows you can select. I'm in history because I use this a lot, but let's go to all. There are 85 of them, and it allows you to do things effects wise. So this one, brightness and contrast, I can adjust the brightness of these guys and the contrast of them, and stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. Most times just reading them is enough to tell you what they do. This change drawing color one changes the drawing color. I can adjust that how I want. Now they're blue, my favorite color. You can set them to black and white. You can invert the color. If you come to the blur section, I can blur them out. There's a lot of different stuff you can do here. You don't need all of them. At least I don't use them a lot. These are the ones that I use. In this history section, the history section just shows you the ones that you've used recently. And the ones on this left side are the ones that I pretty much always use. The rest of them, I might have pressed once by accident or used once, but I don't really use them. You can kind of experiment with these and find what you like, but that's what that FX filter tool does. We already went over the brush and eraser tool, so now we're at the Smudge Tool. Now what the Smudge Tool does is kind of right there in its name. You can smudge your drawing, make it look like you dragged a wet finger across it, which is actually pretty cool. Now it looks like he's a ghost, or I could use it for like a speed effect. So let's say this guy's moving really fast. I could just pull out some of him with that smudge tool, and now it's like he's kind of speeding to this position instead of just standing there. The sliders down here, again, work very similarly to the brush tool. I can use this one to adjust the size and strength of my smudge tool right here, just the little opacity of it. So yeah, that's the smudge tool, kind of takes care of itself. If you look down here when you're using different tools to where the brushes would be, and you press on it, you can change the tool you're currently using, my goodness, to behave differently. So I usually keep it in airbrush triangle, but let's say I press soft mapping bleed pen, that's a mouthful, and then I use the smudge tool now. It gives that bleeding pen effect. So anytime you're using a tool and you see this little brush window, you press on it and it will allow you to adjust how that tool behaves, similar to a brush, but it will be the tool. So for the blur tool, very similar. You can adjust it here and it will blur differently. Blur tool is also blur tool. I'm getting a little tongue-tied on these tools. Blur tool is also pretty straightforward. It blurs stuff. You can adjust the size of it, the opacity / strength of it, and that color thing is slashed out because it doesn't have a color. Anytime you see that color box slashed, it basically means that color does not apply to the tool that you're using, because I can't blur in red. So now we move on to the special tool. All that basically means is it's like a Liquify pen. If you ever used a digital art program before, what the Liquify pen does is if I press right here, it looks kind of like it's turned this to water and like I'm swirling the water around. I don't use this. I don't think I've ever used this on anything except just being silly. If you press these little buttons, it can change how the Liquify pen behaves. Here it's a pinch, so it'll pinch the lines inward, that's a thing that it's doing, I guess. You can tell I don't like this tool. You have different buttons here to adjust it, and then that little eraser one is the revert one, so it'll revert it back to normal, which that is cool. You can fix whatever horrible contortion it's done to your okay, I'm gonna stop racking on this Liquify pen special tool, but there you go. You can use it if you want. Now we're gonna move into the bucket tool. That's up there with the brush and eraser tool. You're gonna use this a lot. Now, what the bucket tool does is it's basically just like throwing color into a boundaried area. So I press right here, it will fill in between these blue lines here. So it's not gonna go outside of that, it's gonna fill in between those. I press here, it does the same thing. Now if I press here, you see it fills the whole space. That is because the lines are not closed. A couple ways to fix this. You could just close the line, then it will fill in there. Or the bucket tool also has settings. This one real quick is the eraser bucket, so it will erase the stuff that you've filled. It leaves these raggedy edges, so I don't really use it, but it is there. If you go to the settings here, you see this thing that says gap recognition. Turn that on, and now it will recognize the gap and know that the bucket tool will basically be able to understand that you don't want it to go outside of this line, even though there is a space there. So with the gap recognition off, and then with it on, you can adjust the settings of the gap recognition right here, or I should say the expansion and strength of your bucket tool, not the gap recognition itself. These little settings, I don't mess with them too much. You can use these. I use these all the time. The current layer, specific layer, and canvas settings, similar to the magic wand tool like we touched on earlier. It basically sets which layer this bucket tool will be referencing. I'm going to get into layers a little bit later, so I'll leave that there for now. Now we have this vector tool. Vectors are a different type of beast. So basically, this will allow you to edit vector layers. So it's not going to do anything now, because I don't have any vector layers. So we will come back to that when we have some vector layers. Text tool, nice little tool. You press it, nothing's going to happen until you tap on the screen, and then you can press add text and, type some stuff in. That's pretty cool. You have a couple of settings here. We'll quickly go through these. Font, obviously. You can change your font. Now, there are some default fonts that Ibispaint gives you. Then you can press the little star and add them to your favorites. Let Ibispaint know that you like these the best. But you might notice you don't have a lot of the fonts that I have. You're like, why don't I have those? Press this plus button right here, and it will take you to the World Wide Web, where you can then download fonts. It has these free fonts pulled up for you right away, and you can just go there and find something you like, press download, and then it will appear in your font section. Also, let's say you want a specific type of font. I'll just type in free manga fonts, like that. You get some options like that, and you can select those. Now, unless you want to actually pay for them, I suggest looking for the free ones or the copyright-free ones. Make sure they're for commercial use, stuff like that. Use at your own risk, all those little things. But most times, if it says free, it is, so that's really nice. Then you can put right or left or center, and that just shows where your text would be. You have horizontal, which is in case you want your text to be to the side like this, and then put it back to vertical. That's usually how I keep it. You can move it around like this. Use this little thing, which will increase how much text you can fit in a row. So if I do like this, the X no longer fits, as you can see. Then I pull it back. Now you have your size. Adjust the size, of course. And then style, that's a little tricky. Sometimes you're like, how do I change the color? It's in the style part. So where it says text, you press text and adjust the color like that. Stroke is basically this little white border I have. You can turn stroke off by pressing this 0, or you can thicken that brother up like that. I usually keep it at 1. That's good enough. You can change the stroke color as well, which is cool. The border color, I don't mess with the borders too much, but basically, I'll show you real quick. The border adds this square border right about where this square is. So if you want that, you can have that, and you can adjust the color of that, and the style of pen that the border is in. So that's what that does. I don't really use that, but it's there. Ibispaint has a lot of stuff that's just there if you want it, and out of your way if you don't need it. Then you have background. This just adds a little background to your, let's see here. It's not adding a background. There we go. Opacity. That's what it was. This basically adds a little background to your text. If you want a little thick square around it, you can have that. I usually keep that all the way off because I don't want a background on my text. You have the spacing of the text. You can adjust that, which is nice. And then you have the order of the text. This is if you have a bunch of different text files. So see here, I'll add some more text, just some random stuff. And then if I go into, you'll notice this little pencil. That's how you edit your text. If I go into order, it now shows the 2 text things that I have. I can reorder them, and that's what that does. So, cool thing to have. I can also just delete it if I don't want that text to exist in this plane anymore, and it's gone forever. I'm just being dramatic. You can get it back. You can get it back if you want, but it's gone until I bring it back. Now, when you make text, it automatically generates its own layer. So if I press layers here, this button that we didn't touch on earlier is the layer button. We're still a couple tools away from layers, but real quick, you guys, text makes its own layer. I'll leave that there and come back to it in a second. Switch back here. Now you have frame divider. This is great if you make comics. So if you press frame divider, it works very similarly to the text tool. You press in here, add a frame, and now you'll notice a frame appear at the borders. You can adjust the thickness, color, stuff like that. Once you're happy, you press this check mark, and here's where the fun begins. So if you're making a comic, you can drag, and bam, it creates nice, neat panel borders just like that. You could keep adding those in there, and I love it. It's great. Now, another thing you can do is edit those borders. So now that I have this panel, I use the select tool, and I can just adjust it to how I want. If you're making a comic, I make a lot of comics, which you guys should check out, by the way, a little shameless plug. There you go. You can adjust that just like that. Also, frame dividers make their own layer, just like text does. I'll delete that for now. We're almost to layers, guys. I'm almost getting there. Finally, the eyedropper tool. I kind of talked about this at the beginning of the video. It just lets you hover over a color, and then you now have that color to use. Just like that. Really cool. You can also press and hold, and then the eyedropper will pop up, and you can use it like that. New thing they added in Ibispaint is when you hover over a color, it shows the layer that that color is from. So let's say you have a bunch of layers, you can just hover over something and then press, and it will take you to that layer, which is really cool thing to have. And finally, the canvas tool. We've made it to the end of this toolbar. You press that and it allows you to adjust the actual canvas that you're working on. So you can change the canvas size. They have numbers here. Let's see, I can make it small like this. You see that little square? I can make it super big. Let's see, like that. That's slightly bigger than the canvas we have, so I press that, and now it's bigger. I can also undo that if I want to. Then you have the trim. I use this a lot. You can just trim the canvas down with these little sliders here, and now your canvas is that big. You can undo that as well. Canvas, you can change the DPI, which you always want to make sure your DPI is nice and high. Mine is at 350. You should have yours at 350 as well, because if you ever want to print out what you're drawing, you want at least 300 DPI. That gives you enough of a quality image that you could print. Higher, better, but of course, more strain on your program, as I touched on earlier. Then you have a couple other settings. You can flip your canvas like this, which some people like to do that. You could rotate it 90 degrees to the left if you want, or to the right. You have color mode, which I've never really used, but I guess. Okay, you can change your canvas to grayscale, or black and white, or color. We're gonna keep it in color because we're colorful people. And just like that, I've gone through every tool on the left and on the bottom right, except for this little arrow. I know you guys are looking at that. I'm gonna come back to that. We're quickly gonna go up here, and we're gonna touch on these real quick. I feel like I'm touching on a lot of stuff. I'm getting all up in this tools business, but that is okay. Press here, and you have these settings. Reference window, you flick that on, and you get the greatest asset known to man, the reference window. Love that thing. You could also flick it off if you don't want greatness in your life, I guess. Then you have the grid. That just makes a grid if you want. If you're drawing something and you want to have a little grid reference, even though I'm drawing this as if there's no reference at all, you have a grid. That's nice. You can also adjust how the grid looks, how many intervals it has. So if you need a grid in your life, they got you covered. The manga manuscript option, I never turn this on. I don't recommend turning it on. You can, but I don't know what it does, so I like to leave it alone. And display when zoomed, it basically means when you zoom in on stuff, it can either be pixelated or it could be smooth. I keep it smooth. I think pixelated might be a little bit easier on your device, but I had to keep it smooth. Smooth is better. That's what this does. I'm gonna turn the grid off. I don't need that. I'm gonna leave the reference window on because, reference window equals greatness. We'll touch on the reference window a little bit later. That's pretty straightforward. Now, over here, we touched on this tool already. We know what that does. Now, this finger looks like it's pressing a button. When you press that, you get some more tools. Your stabilizer. What that does is basically allows you to draw straighter lines. So this is just me, no stabilizer, drawing a line. And then if I turn it all the way up to 10, this is me drawing a line. Look how much straighter that is. Stabilizer just helps stabilize your brush, which is cool. If you're sketching, keep it low to off. If you're doing clean lines and you want them to look as clean as possible, crank that thing up as high as you can. Force fade, I don't really use this, but it just forces a little bit of a faded thickening in your lines. I don't know why you would want that, but again, it is there for you. Turn that off. And once you turn off force fade, that hides a bunch of little settings. You should see they're highlighted when it's on, dark when it's off. You have method, real time, and after. If I switch it to after, you can see it does nothing, I guess. Real time. Okay. I would think that real time just means that you're going to accurately see in real time your brush, and after means that it's going to be slightly delayed, but they look to be performing the same. If one of you guys know, let me know in the comments. And finally, pretty much the only thing I use the little window for, the drawing tools. Now, drawing tools are really great. If I press this line here, now when I go to draw, I'll get this little dotted line that I can move around as I please. And if I stretch it out, I'll get a perfectly straight line, which is really good. As you can tell, the rest of these tools do a similar thing. That one makes a square, this one makes a circle. The square and circle aren't as reliable to me because they only emulate out of a certain point, and it's hard to kind of gauge where that point starts and ends. But still, really cool tool to have. You can turn on fill or don't fill, so basically means when you make a circle or a square, it will fill it with a color automatically, which is nice. You can also change the color that it fills with. I always have it set to fill with current color because I like it that way, but you could turn that off and change it to something like this. Then it will fill with that color that you have selected, which is pretty cool. And there are a bunch of other drawing tools here. You can mess with those, and you got a bunch of little options with that, which is, it's great. It gives you a lot of things you can do with this Ibispaint. Some of them, again, are going to be unnecessary to you. Some of them are going to be like lifesavers to you. It all depends on how you like to work, but that's what this button does. Then you have your rulers, another highly used button up here. You have it off right now. If I press here, you'll see all these lines appear. This is my ruler. So now I can only draw straight lines in accordance with this ruler's lines, which is good if you want to draw perfectly straight lines. By grabbing these circles, I can move my ruler around and adjust it, and then I can only draw straight lines in this direction. Now, you can delete your straight ruler or you can turn it off. Turning it off means that it's not gone, it's just not visible, so when putting it back on, it'll be the same as the way you left it. You can delete it, which means it's completely gone, so when you press on it again, it's oriented in the default position. You can select it, so let's say You have multiple ones. You add another ruler in case you need a couple going. Now you can select one and have that one active. So this is cool if you're drawing in perspective. I'm going to delete both of them. And then you have your circular ruler, same principle as the straight ruler, except it allows you to draw in a circle. You can adjust that to your liking. Then you have the elliptical ruler, basically an oval. You can adjust that in 2 directions, which is really cool. You can even turn it if you want. It has all these little symmetry lines on it. That is really great. I'm going to delete that and delete that as well. And now I'm going to get rid of all the stuff on this canvas because it's a little too much by pressing the clear layer button like I told you earlier. And look at this final ruler, which is the radial ruler. So it allows you to draw lines radiating out from a point. It's beneficial. It could do something for you. If you're drawing like an abyss, you could just kind of make it all end in that singular spot. I don't know. Depends on what you're doing. I delete that. And then you have your symmetry rulers down here, which I don't really use too much except for this one right here. This basically means whatever I draw on this side will happen on this side and vice versa. I can turn it with this little phase thing right here, and now it works the other way. And then you have a similar ruler right here, the kaleidoscope ruler. That's a lot. If you want to draw this cool little abstract kaleidoscope little effect, I mean, I'm not even gonna lie to you, that's really cool. That's really cool. Never used it for anything, but it's super fun to do. These 3 at the end, I don't use them for anything. They're a little complicated and they don't make sense. And honestly, I don't see the point of them. They don't work the way that I feel like they should. This one makes a bunch of lines, like 6 lines. It's cool. I don't know how to use it, but it's cool. Turn all those off. And now this final thing right here is little assets that Ibispaint comes with. They're alright. You press here, you can get this little tiny man, you bring him in, and you could use him to trace over if you want. I'm gonna make him look super angry that we disturbed him. Give him a little hat. There you go, he's right there. He's like, what are you looking at? Anyway, Ibispaint has some of those little assets. If you've used Clip Studio Paint before, it's kind of like those little 3D models that they have, but except they're not 3D and you can't move them. But they're right there. And you have favorites and history for that as well. Now that little angry dude is in my history because I used him. So there you go. That is all the tools on this main space. Now I'm finally going to get to the 2 that I left out that I'm sure you guys have been waiting with bated breath for. These are your layers. You press this and you have access to layers. If you used digital art before, you know what I'm talking about. If you never have, quick little thing for your beginners is you can think of layers like this. You draw something on this square, like a circle, right? Now, let's say you create a new layer. Now it's like you have something above that. So let's say I draw something else, like a smiley face on him. Now it's like it's separated. So if I keep adding layers, I can keep adding features and things, and they kind of just layer over each other, which I know isn't the best way to explain it, but that's kind of a visual representation of it. Now I'll show you how it actually works. If I draw something on this layer, I have a layer above me, and then I just draw on this layer. Now, these 2 layers are independent of each other. So let's say I don't like the face I drew on this little circle. I can turn this layer off. This eye basically means visible, not visible. So now that layer is not visible. The circle still is, but the face is not. I can turn it back on, or if I know I don't want it, I can delete the layer with this garbage button. And you know what? Let's delete all of these layers. Now, in Ibispaint, you always need to have at least one layer. You can't delete all of them, but you can delete up to this last one. To add a layer, press this plus button. If you want to press this plus button, you'll get a couple options. You can add a folder, a vector layer, which we talked about a little bit earlier, an adjustment layer. You can duplicate a layer or add a layer from canvas. I'm going to show you how all those work really quick. But first, let's just quickly go over the main layer functions. That way it'll be a little bit easier to get into those. So I'm going to put this character as a base so that we have a little something to work with. It's a budget Batman. That should be more than enough to get us started. Now also a little intermission here. It's a perfect time to use one of those little effects things like I talked about. I'm going to use the change drawing color one and change his lines to black because I prefer that. I'm going to change my color to black too, just like that. Okay, so now we have budget Batman on this layer, but just his line work. He's not colored, so we'll put line work. Also, I feel like I just skipped over the fact of how I just named this layer. To name a layer, press these three dots, which will give you some options, and press rename layer, then you can rename it. You also have select opacity, which we talked about with the magic wand tool earlier. You have clear white color and clear white grayscale, which basically means clear white color is going to get rid of any white on your screen. So when I used to color manga pages, for example, I would use this to get rid of all the white background in that, and it just leaves you a clear black and, well, not black and white, but it just leaves the black there and the gray a little bit. And clear white grayscale would clear the white and the grays as well. Select opacity, I already said that. And then save layer as transparent PNG would just save the layer as a photo with a transparent background, which means you can do more stuff to it later, which is pretty cool. And then rasterize, which I'll talk about a little bit later again. So we have budget Batman's line work. We want to color him, so we're going to add a layer, but layers are added above. So what I'm going to do is pull it down underneath the line work so I can color it. So by grabbing these three bars right here, I can move the layer underneath, and now it's underneath. Then I can switch between them just by tapping here. So if I want to close Batman's lines like that to make him easier to fill later, because as we've seen, filling with broken up lines isn't the best. So I'm just using the tools here a little bit to get him in a better shape to be the perfect demonstration. So there we go. Something happened to his hand. I don't know. He'll be alright. Anyway, now we have budget Batman all set up, so we can go through how to use these basic layer functions. So from top to bottom, this little checkerboard pattern looking thing, that will clear your layer. So just like up here, that will clear the layer. So we're going to undo that. That's what that does. This will invert the color of your layer. So since I have black on this layer, if I press invert, it will turn it white. So invert will basically turn it the opposite color to what is already there. Then you have the move tool, or just like earlier, a lot of these tools are repetitive, but they're in easier to access locations. So this is a little transform tool, just like we talked about earlier, so I won't stay on that too long. Then you have this. This will flip horizontally. So now it looks like Batman's like turning, like, what's up? What do you want? Like, let's do this. Some people like to turn their canvas to get a better look at their art and help them see if something's looking wrong. I don't really do that, but sometimes it's cool to turn your canvas regardless. This, same deal, but it will turn your canvas the other way. And when I say canvas, I mean the layer. So it's not actually turning your canvas, it's turning the layer itself. So that's something to keep in mind too. So let's say I have something on the layer underneath, like a little speech bubble, and I turn this layer, it's not going to affect the layer underneath it. So you're just literally affecting the layer. Undo all that. And then you go down here. This button is to merge layers down. So let's say I want these two layers to be combined. So let's say I did this in here. I want this to be on the same layer. So I just press this, and now they're one layer. I've merged them down. I'm gonna undo that as well. And finally, I pressed this earlier. This garbage can is just gonna delete the layer. I'm gonna undo that as well. Now this FX button is gray. You cannot use it right now. I'll show you what that does later when it applies. And then the three dots we already touched on what those do. So those are the basic layer functions on your right. Now you have these buttons here on the bottom. This is the opacity slider, so it'll adjust the opacity of your layer. And you can also press the number if you want a specific value. Then you have this little arrow button. You'll see it just made a little change. It clipped this layer to the layer underneath it, which basically means now nothing on this layer will show up unless it's in the boundaries of this layer. So to better illustrate that, I'm just going to quickly add a layer above Batman, and then I'm going to clip it to this layer. So that created a little clipping mask. Now, change my color for visibility. Anything I draw on this layer, it will exist, so that scribble does exist, but it will only show up under the constraints of the layer underneath it, which is really something cool to have, especially if you're doing shading, or you're doing a gradient, or you're doing anything that you want restricted to a certain area. You can just clip a layer to it, and then it will be constrained, which is great. Even if I bucket the color like that, it's constrained to this layer. So that's cool to have. Delete that. Now this A with a lock is the alpha lock button. It does basically the same thing as the clipping mask, except it's on the same layer. So now I can only switch my tool back to the brush tool. I can only draw in the constraints of lines that I've already drawn, except it's on this layer. So I can't draw out here. It's not going to show up. It's constrained to the lines or the colors that are already there. Turn that off. Now you have this where it says normal. Those are blending modes. I'm going to open that up. And blending modes basically change how the colors affect the layers underneath them. So to really show you what blending modes do, I'll have to come back to them after I color Budget Batman. But here they are. You can scroll through them, and they do a lot of different things. You also have screen tones here if you make comics. If I press it, it'll basically turn every line into that screen tone. It doesn't really show up for these lines right here because it's not enough input for it, but it does do something. I'll have to show you guys that in a second. I'll switch it back to normal for now, and let's get into using multiple layers. Now I'm quickly going to just color in Budget Batman here and get him looking the way Batman should. Give him a little bit of a yellow thing going on. I think that's how the newest Batman looks. I don't know. Let's see. I mean Batman in the comics, not movie Batman. And then his utility belt, something like that. There we go. And now I'm coloring on the layer underneath. So all these colors are separate from the line work of Batman. And I'm going to turn on gap recognition real quick. It doesn't always work the way you want it to, but this time it did. So turn that back off. And now Batman is colored. I'm gonna put a little bit more right here. Now he's colored. So if I look at my layers, I can see that his colors and his lines are separate. Now we can get into what this other stuff does. So I'm quickly gonna add a layer between my colors and my line work to demonstrate what the blending modes do, and then we'll move on to the other functions. So I'm gonna switch to an airbrush for this so that it's a little bit easier to see. I'm gonna pick out like a red. So if I put a little bit of red on this side of Batman, and then I'm gonna clip that to the colors, so now it's only gonna be in the colors here. Now I'm gonna go to the blending modes and switch it to overlay. And basically what that does is it's gonna blend the colors a little bit better with Batman himself. I adjust the opacity of it, it looks better too. But the other blending modes do different things, like light and color will lighten the color. You can do pin light, you can do invert, you could do darken, multiply. There's so many things you could do with these blending modes, and really you have to just play around with them. I use the overlay blending mode a lot for a lot of different things like shading and stuff like that, but really just play around with them. They're all here for you, and you can test them and undo them at will, so there's no real danger to it. Also, the screen tone thing that did not work earlier, now if I press it, you can see it adds that dotted screen tone look to Batman right there, and that's what those screen tones do. Now, another thing is the rasterize that we talked about earlier, because right now you see it's still colored, and if I was to try to put a blending mode as well, it would get rid of the screen tones. So what I want to do is select my screen tone and then rasterize right here, and now this is its own thing. So now it's rasterized. I don't know exactly what that means exactly, but when you rasterize something, it basically turns it into a normal layer as if you drew it, so it's no longer affected by anything else. And now I can overlay it, or I could lighten the color, or do whatever I want, and it works like a regular layer basically. I'm going to delete that real quick, and these buttons, which are what we need to talk about, I'm going to go through what they do. Duplicating a layer basically just duplicates a layer. That's pretty straightforward. Then you have add layer from canvas. Now what this does is when you press it, it takes everything that's on the canvas at that time and adds a layer containing that information. So if I turn the other two layers off, now the line work and colors of Batman are one layer that I can adjust individually, which is really cool. I use this a lot. So let's say I wanted to add effects to this. I could take the layer I duplicated, I could blur it a little bit, and then I can overlay it, and look at that hazy cinematic look that it gives me. That's really cool. Now I'm going to delete that layer. The rest of these buttons, you have FX adjustment layer. When you press that, it's going to add some of these effects that we talked about earlier, like for instance, hue, saturation, and lightness. So I could change the hue of Batman like that. Let's do that. And the saturation of him, and how light or dark he is. And then it's going to put that information in its own layer. So I could turn off those hue saturation changes, or that FX button that was dark earlier. By pressing it, I can adjust everything that I just did, which is really great. Sometimes you want to add effects to stuff, but you don't want it to be permanently on that layer. So you have the FX adjustment layers. I'm going to delete that real quick. And then you have vector layers, which we talked about earlier. That kind of needs its own video, but just quickly, vector layers are math-based, raster layers are pixel-based. So if I take a vector layer I can size it up as much as I want, and it's still going to look smooth and not pixelated, which is something that rasterized lines, which is what these are. If I zoom in on those, you can see that pixelated effect and that little blurry, hazy outline. Vector lines aren't going to do that, and that's one of the best things about them. They're also a little bit easier to adjust than rasterized lines, which are what the normal lines are. And then that vector tool that, again, we couldn't use earlier. If you have a vector layer active, you press that and you can select any vector lines you have and adjust them. You press this, you get a little extra details. I can adjust the line thickness, I can adjust the line color, I can change the brush that it looks like. There's so many things. I can reorder it. If I have multiple vector lines, I can reorder them, and I can just straight up delete it. So that's what vector layers do. And then finally, adding a folder just allows you to organize your layers a little better. If you want to put items in a folder, you can grab these 3 bars, pull it to the right, and now these are in the folder. So I can basically condense them down and make it a little bit simpler to go through if I have a lot of layers, which, trust me, you will as you get deeper into this digital art thing. If you want, you can pull them out of the folder if you don't want them in there anymore. Another way to add them to the folder is to pull them underneath it, just like that, which is cool. And you can even take the folder as a whole and adjust it. So anything in the folder can be adjusted as a whole, or you could select the individual layer to adjust that as well. So folders are really great. I use them a lot. Then you have this little camera button, which allows you to import an image from your camera roll, which is really cool. If you want to edit an image or you want an image to reference, you can pull it in, zoom in on it. This is like a X-Men Avengers comic cover. And now that's in here. It creates its own layer, and you can just, use it. I don't know. I used to import a lot of pictures, but now I just use the reference window, which works the same way. I can press this 3 dots to add a reference, and I can add the same comic cover, and now I have it to reference without it being in my space, which is cool. Like if I want to add something to this, like as if I'm referencing that's horrible referencing, but you get the point. Reference window, great thing to have. I can also color pick from this, which is great. So reference window, definitely, that's why I said how great it was earlier. I can delete this reference, I can reset its position, I can flick through multiple references if I have them, because you can actually stockpile up as many references as you want, and just flick through them, which is really great. Pressing the square will set it back to the canvas mode. You can navigate your canvas with this little reference window here, which is also another feature to have. These buttons will they will flip your canvas, your entire canvas, so not just the layer like these buttons do. It will flip the entire canvas, and that is every single button. This right here will activate the floating layer window, which basically takes all of this and lets you put it here at the side, a little floating window. You make it bigger, smaller, longer, shorter. It's really great. You can delete it. Another way to get that is to just pull out this bar, then you can move it where you wish. So really great to have if you want all that information in a smaller version on your screen. And now finally this button that I avoided talking about earlier, this little arrow. It's basically how you leave this canvas if you're done. Also, you can access those settings I talked about earlier. And now I can kind of show you what some of them do. I told you I would come back to this. For those of you who are waiting, this is it. That background color thing I said I would show you later just allows you to adjust the background color of your Ibispaint, which is really cool. I darkened mine because I like a little dark workspace. You can also reset it to default. Watermark on videos is basically that Ibispaint logo that shows up when you export a time lapse or animation or anything like that. You have keyboard layout, cloud storage. I'm going to skip over those. Pressure sensitivity. You don't really need to mess with this unless you have like an Apple Pencil or a digital like Bluetooth pencil that you've hooked up to this. Or a supported stylus, something like that. You can adjust look at that, they have 4 professionals, that's us now. You can adjust different settings like your bucket settings, stabilizer, filters. Basically, this means that when you go from canvas to canvas, project to project, these settings will stay the same. So if I adjust my stabilizer, I have this on, it'll stay number 4, whatever canvas I'm in. Or if I go back and turn that off, the stabilizer won't save those settings. You have your account. That's another thing I'm going to skip over it, the privacy. And you have these little things to reset your workspace to default if you want to show the tutorials again, because Ibispaint gives you little tutorials when you log in, your custom brushes, literally everything. All these little settings right here, little quality of life things. I really love that you can mess with some of these, even show undo message. Basically, when you press the undo button, it'll show that little fade in, fade out message to show you that you undid something. That's cool. You can turn that on and off. Like, that they thought of that is great. You might not want that. You can adjust the layer row height. I have it at 75. If I raise it, it'll basically adjust it like that. I like that they give you a little preview of that. The floating layer row height. That's cool. I might kind of keep it like that. I think I like that. So now the layer row height is a little different. So you can mess with these settings and kind of customize your app to suit yourself and your needs. Now we have the final buttons right here. Pretty straightforward. You have the save image button. You just press right here. You can save as a PNG, a JPEG, and you can save it as a transparent. They have AI super resolution, which I've never used. I don't know what that does. I feel like it saves perfectly fine how it is. I don't need AI. And that's just a quick way to save. And then finally, you press this, and you're back in your gallery. Now that's the entire working space of Ibispaint and how to use each button and functionality. I went through everything I possibly could. There are a few little more things that this app can do. I'll show you real quick. So if you want to edit this, or you want to go back to drawing or working in it, you just press the edit button and you're back in here. I'm going to go back out. If you come out of your image and you want to save it, you press this share button here and you can save the image. And Ibispaint records time lapses of your drawing. So if you see this little play button here, you press that and it shows and it plays back everything that you did in this canvas. Really good. You can post it to your social media, watch it back for reference. It's just a really cool feature that they do that for you, and you can save that time lapse just by pressing right there. Saving an IPV and Ibispaint artwork, basically it's like saving like a Photoshop file, I guess, best way to compare it to. So if I save an IPV, I can then use this. So if, let's say I'm working with someone else, I can save an IPV of this, send it to them, and then they can open it up in their Ibispaint with all the layers and stuff and just keep working on it. Ibispaint is compatible with Clip Studio as well, so you could send this as like a Clip Studio file. And then these last two, preserved layers, flattened layers, that's a Photoshop document, I believe, and that's a cool thing to have as well. This little info button gives you some information on the artwork itself. The plus button, of course, to add another canvas. And that is pretty much it. That's everything you can do in Ibispaint. That's how all the tools work. thank you guys for watching. I'm gonna just play the footage here of me drawing, and that is the full, complete, total guide to Ibispaint. I don't think there's any other video like this, going into every tool like this. If you want specific tutorials on how to do certain things or actions, let me know in the comments, and I will make a video specifically for how to animate in Ibispaint. I'm working on that, but everything you learned in this video will translate to Ibispaint animation, because it's the same interface, just with a timeline crammed in the bottom there. So that's all for me today. I know it's been a long video, but there's a lot to unpack with that. I hope you guys learned something, and tell me what you think of Ibispaint. Do you like using it? Have you been using it for a while? You know, let's get a little conversation going, and I will see you guys in the next video. Watch these that are recommended to you, subscribe, like, all that stuff, and I'll see you next time.